I should have noticed it the first time, but after 16 years, you stop looking too closely at the small things. My name is Leah Garrison, and I have worked as a coroner's assistant at the Hillside County Medical Examiner's Office in Portland, Maine for 16 years. In that time, I have tagged more bodies than I care to count. The procedure is simple. Verify the case number, attach the identification tag to the right big toe, log it in the system, slide the drawer closed. It is routine. It is mechanical. It is supposed to be foolproof. The body arrived on a Tuesday morning in early November. No identification, no personal effects, no paperwork from the scene. The transport driver, a man named Eddie, who had been doing this longer than I had, just shrugged when I asked him about it. Found in a motel room on Route 1, he said. No wallet, no phone, nothing. They're running prints now. I looked at the body. Male, mid-40s, unremarkable features, no visible trauma. The intake form listed the cause of death as pending. I filled out a temporary tag by hand, wrote unknown male, November 7th, 2023, and tied it carefully around his right big toe. The yellow plastic felt cold in my hands, the way it always did. I logged him into the system as Case 4792 and wheeled him into Cold Storage Bay 3, Drawer 12. I remember because 12 was my daughter's age that year. 2 hours later, I had to retrieve a file from the storage bay. I passed Drawer 12 on my way to the filing cabinet. I glanced at it out of habit, the way you glance at a stove to make sure you turned it off. The tag was on the left foot. I stopped walking. I stood there in the cold fluorescent light, staring at that yellow tag dangling from the wrong toe, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not panic, not yet, just a slow, creeping wrongness. I opened the drawer. The body had not moved. Same position, same angle, arms at the sides, sheet pulled to the chest, but the tag was definitely on the left big toe now. I checked the case number, 4792, same tag, same handwriting. I told myself I had made a mistake, that I had been distracted, tired, that I had put it on the left foot without realizing. I moved the tag back to the right foot, tied it tighter this time, double knotted it, and closed the drawer. I did not mention it to anyone. The next morning, the tag was on the left foot again. I asked my supervisor, a man named Holland, who had worked in the coroner's office since the early 90s, if anyone else had accessed Drawer 12. He checked the log. No one. I asked if the cleaning crew might have opened it. He said they were not allowed in the storage bays. I moved the tag back to the right foot. I tied it so tight the plastic bit into the skin. I took a photograph with my phone. I left. The following morning, I checked the photograph before I even walked into the building. Right foot, yellow tag, double knot. I went downstairs to the storage bay. Left foot, same tag, same knot. I compared the photo to the body in front of me. Identical knot, different foot. That was when I checked the security footage. Our system records everything. 4 cameras cover the storage bays, running 24 hours, motion activated. I pulled up the feed for Drawer 12 from the night before. I watched myself close the drawer at 4:13 in the afternoon. The timestamp rolled forward. 4:30, 5 o'clock, 6, nothing. The drawer did not open. No one entered the room. At 2:47 in the morning, the footage glitched just for a second. A single frame of static, barely noticeable. When the image cleared, the drawer was still closed. The room was still empty. But I knew, somehow, I knew. I opened the drawer. The body was exactly where I had left it. I pulled back the sheet. The tag was on the left foot. I looked at the knot. It was the same knot I had tied. Not retied, not cut and replaced. The exact same knot on the wrong foot. I moved it back. Right foot, tight knot. I locked the drawer this time, something we almost never do. I used the master key and turned it until I heard the bolt slide into place. The next morning, the drawer was still locked. I unlocked it. Left foot, same tag, same knot. I stopped moving it after that. On the fifth morning, I came in early, before the rest of the staff arrived. I went straight to drawer 12. I did not look at the tag first. I looked at the face. The body's eyes were open, not wide, not staring, just slightly open, the way a person's eyes might be if they were pretending to sleep, but watching you through their lashes. I had closed those eyes myself when the body first arrived. I was sure of it. I reached forward. My hand was shaking. I touched the eyelid gently, the way we are trained to do, and pulled it down. The eye resisted, just a little, just enough to make me pull my hand back. I checked the tag, left foot. I closed the drawer. I walked upstairs. I told Holland I was sick. I went home. The case was resolved 3 days later. Fingerprints came back. The man's name was Alan Vickers, 46 years old. Cause of death, accidental overdose. No next of kin. He was cremated on a Friday afternoon. I was not there when they took him out of drawer 12. I requested a schedule change. Holland did not ask why. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that tag. I think about the knot I tied, the same knot, moving from one foot to the other without the drawer ever opening. I think about those eyes, just barely open, watching me from the drawer. And I wonder if Alan Vickers was trying to tell me something, trying to say that the name was wrong, or the drawer was wrong, or that he was not supposed to be there at all. I do not work the overnight shift anymore. I do not check drawer 12, even though it has been empty for months. But every now and then, I pass it in the hallway, and I swear I can still see that yellow tag swinging slightly, like someone just touched it, like someone just moved it back. There are files that refuse to close. I learned that the hard way. My name is Marcus Hines, and I have worked as a deputy coroner for the Jefferson County Medical Examiner's Office in Birmingham, Alabama for 12 years. I thought I had seen everything: old cases that went cold, families that stopped calling, bodies that were never claimed. But I had never seen a file that would not stay closed. Not until case 1991-CC. It started on a Monday morning in late September. I came into the office early, the way I always do, and found a manila folder sitting in the center of my desk. Worn edges, water-stained cover, The label read, Case 21CC, Jane Doe, unresolved. I did not remember pulling it. We keep old cases in the basement archive, and I had not been down there in weeks. I assumed one of the clerks had left it for me as part of a records audit. I opened it. The woman inside had no name, no identification. Found in a drainage ditch off County Road A18 on March 4th, 1991. Estimated age 30 to 35. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull. No witnesses, no suspects, no resolution. The case had been marked inactive in June of 1992. A note at the bottom of the file, written in faded blue ink, said the body had been cremated after 6 months of unclaimed status. I read through it once, made a note in the system that the file had been reviewed, and placed it in the return bin for the archives. Then I went about my day. The next Monday, the file was back on my desk. Same folder, same water stains, same faded label. I checked the return bin. Empty. I checked the archive log. No record of it being pulled again. I called down to the basement and asked if anyone had retrieved case 1991-CC. The archivist, a woman named Paulette, who had been there longer than anyone, said no one had been in the old files for over a month. I looked at the folder again. It sat there on my desk, patient and still, like it had been waiting for me. I closed it. I walked it down to the basement myself, past the rows of metal shelving and banker's boxes, and I placed it back in the 1991 section. I made sure it was filed correctly, spine out, label visible. Then I left. The following Monday, it was on my desk again. This time, I did not take it downstairs. I shredded it. Every page. I fed the entire file through the industrial shredder in the records room, watched the paper turn into thin, unreadable strips, and threw the remnants into the waste bin. I went home that night, feeling like I had solved a problem I did not fully understand. On Monday, the file was back. Not shredded, not photocopied. The original, same water stains, same handwriting, same everything. I opened it with shaking hands. The pages were intact. No tears, no creases, as if I had never touched them. I showed it to Holland, the senior deputy, and asked if he remembered the case. He looked at the file for a long time, his face unreadable, and then he closed it and handed it back to me. Let it go, Hines, he said. Some cases do not want to be forgotten. But I could not let it go. I started researching. I pulled every file from 1991, cross-referenced the case numbers, checked the intake logs. Case 1991-CC existed. It was real, but there was something wrong with the dates. The woman had been found on March 4th, 1991. The autopsy was completed on March 6th. The body was released for cremation on September 9th, 1992, but the cremation authorization form was signed on March 7th, 1991. One day after the autopsy, 16 months before the body was officially released. I checked the signature. It was illegible, just a scrawled initial. No name, no title. I went down to the basement again. I found the intake log from March of 1991 and flipped to the day the Jane Doe had been brought in. Her name was listed in the log as Unknown Female CC. No case number, no notes, just those 3 words, written in the same faded blue ink as the file, and beneath it, in the margin, someone had written a single sentence: "Do not open cold storage drawer C." I stood there in the dim light of the archive room, staring at those words, and I felt the temperature drop. Not gradually, all at once. My breath misted in front of me. Cold storage drawer C had not been used in over 20 years. It had been decommissioned after a refrigeration malfunction in 2003. The drawer had been welded shut. I had seen it myself during a safety inspection. I went back upstairs. I did not go near cold storage. That night, I worked late. I was alone in the office, finishing up case notes, when I heard it. A soft, metallic scrape, like a drawer sliding open. It came from downstairs, from cold storage. I told myself it was the building settling, old pipes, expansion joints. I kept typing. The sound came again, slower this time, deliberate. I stood up. I do not know why. I should have left, but I walked downstairs through the empty hallway, past the intake room, and into cold storage. Drawer C was open, just a few inches, enough to see inside. There was a folder lying on the metal shelf. Manila, water stained. I did not need to read the label to know what it said. I reached forward. My hand hovered over the folder. I could feel cold air seeping out of the drawer, colder than the refrigeration units, colder than anything I had ever felt. I pulled my hand back. I closed the drawer. I heard the latch click. I walked back upstairs, grabbed my coat, and left. I did not look back. The next Monday, the file was on my desk again. But this time, there was something else inside it. A photograph, black and white, faded. It showed the morgue hallway, the same hallway I walked down every day. In the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a figure, blurred, indistinct, standing in front of cold storage drawer C. I looked closer. The figure was wearing a coat, my coat, the same one I had been wearing the night I went downstairs. I turned the photo over. On the back, in that same faded blue ink, was a single sentence: "She is still waiting." I do not know who she is. I do not know what she wants. But every Monday, the file comes back. I stopped trying to get rid of it. I stopped opening it. I just leave it on my desk, untouched, and I do my work around it. And sometimes, late at night, when the building is empty and the lights are low, I hear that sound again. The soft metallic scrape of a drawer sliding open. I don't go downstairs anymore. I do not check cold storage because I know drawer C is open. I know the file is inside, and I know, eventually, it will not be enough to just leave it on my desk. One day, I will have to go back down there. One day, I will have to open it. You remember the first cut. You always remember the first cut. It is the moment where the body stops being a person and becomes evidence. But you are not supposed to make that cut twice. My name is Dr. Sir Elena Ruiz, and I have worked as a forensic pathologist at the King County Medical Examiner's Office in Seattle, Washington for 19 years. I have performed over 3,000 autopsies. I have documented drownings, overdoses, homicides, suicides, and deaths so unusual they required consultations with specialists across the country. I have never, in all that time, performed the same autopsy twice, not until Daniel Frost. He came in on a Thursday afternoon in early October. White male, 41 years old, found floating in Lake Washington near the Montlake Cut. The water patrol pulled him out just after dawn. No signs of foul play, no trauma, clothes intact, wallet still in his pocket. Preliminary assessment, accidental drowning, possibly intoxicated. I began the autopsy at 2 in the afternoon. Standard procedure, external examination first. I noted the pallor, the slight bloating consistent with water immersion, the foam around the nostrils and mouth. I documented everything. I made the Y incision. I opened the chest cavity. The lungs were heavy, waterlogged, frothy fluid in the airways. Classic drowning pathology. I took samples. I weighed the organs. I noted the findings in my recorder. Cause of death, drowning, manner of death, pending toxicology. I sutured him closed at 4:17 in the afternoon. I signed the preliminary report. I logged the case as complete pending lab results. Case number 784-3, Daniel Marcus Frost. I wheeled him to cold storage myself and placed him in drawer 19. I remember thinking his hands looked young for his age. No wedding ring, no calluses, clean nails. I went home that night and did not think about him again. 2 days later, on Saturday morning, I received a call from the intake supervisor, a man named Greg, who had worked the weekend shift for as long as I had been there. He said they had a new case for me. Drowning victim, found in Lake Washington. Could I come in? I told him I was not on call. He said the family was insistent. They wanted the autopsy completed immediately. I asked him for the case number. He said, 7845. Name is Daniel Frost. I went still. I asked him to repeat the name. Daniel Marcus Frost, 41, pulled from the lake this morning near the Montlake Cut. I told him there was a mistake. I told him I had already autopsied Daniel Frost. Case 784-3, Thursday afternoon. I told him to check the logs. There was a long pause. Then Greg said, Dr. Ruiz, I am looking at the intake log right now. We have no record of a Daniel Frost on Thursday. The only Frost we have is the one that came in this morning. I hung up. I drove to the office. I went straight to cold storage. I opened drawer 19. It was empty. I checked the log. Drawer 19 had been empty since Wednesday. No record of Daniel Frost. No record of case 784-3. I went to the autopsy suite. I looked for my notes, my recordings, my photographs, nothing. I checked the dictation system, no file. I called the lab, no samples logged under that case number. But I remembered. I remembered the weight of his lungs. I remembered the color of the foam. I remembered the scar on his left shoulder, a thin white line just below the clavicle. I went to the intake area. Daniel Frost was there, on the table. in a black body bag. Same face, same age, but different clothes. A gray hoodie instead of the blue jacket, jeans instead of slacks, and the case number was different. 7845. I asked Greg when the transport team had brought him in. He checked the log, 8:43 that morning. I asked him who made the call. He said the same water patrol unit that always handled lake recoveries. I called them. I asked if they had pulled a body from Lake Washington on Thursday. They said no. Their last recovery had been on Saturday morning. Daniel Marcus Frost. They were certain. I asked them to describe the body. They described him perfectly, down to the scar on his left shoulder. I went back to the autopsy suite. I stood over Daniel Frost's body and I stared at that scar. The same scar I had documented 2 days ago. The same scar that should not exist because the autopsy had never happened. I did not want to open him, but I had to. I made the Y incision. I pulled back the skin, and I stopped. There were sutures, faint, almost invisible, but there, running along the edges of the incision I had just made. Old sutures, dissolved sutures, the kind we use to close a body after autopsy. I traced them with my gloved finger. They followed the exact path of the cut I had just made. I opened the chest cavity. The ribs had been cut. Recently, I could see the marks from the saw, clean and precise, exactly where I would have made them. I removed the sternum. The organs were gone. Not missing. Removed. Cleanly. Professionally. The chest cavity was empty, except for a small amount of residual fluid. I stood there, staring into the hollow space where his heart and lungs should have been, and I felt something crack inside my chest. Not fear. Not yet. Just a deep, cold certainty that I was looking at my own work. I checked his mouth. I found foam, the same frothy fluid I had documented on Thursday. I checked his lungs. They were not there because I had already removed them. I had already weighed them. I had already noted the water in the airways. I stepped back from the table. I pulled off my gloves. I walked out of the suite. I did not file a report. I did not sign off on the autopsy. I told Greg there had been a mistake, that the case needed to be reassigned. He did not ask questions. Daniel Frost was cremated 3 days later. No autopsy on record. No cause of death determined. The family did not push for answers, but I still have the images in my head. The empty chest, the old sutures, the scar I documented twice. I checked the logs again last week. There is no case 7843. There never was. But sometimes, late at night, I go back to that Saturday morning. I think about the call from Greg. I think about the body on the table, the same body I had already opened, already documented, already closed. And I think about the drawer 19, empty on Saturday morning. But I know I put him there on Thursday. I know I closed that drawer. I know I logged the case. So where did he go? And if I opened him on Thursday, who put him back in the lake? I do not perform weekend autopsies anymore. I do not take calls from Greg, and I do not go near drawer 19, even when it is empty, especially when it is empty. Evidence does not lie. That is what they teach you. Objects are objective. They do not change. They do not manipulate. They simply exist. waiting to tell their story. I believed that for 11 years. Then I opened Box 19F. My name is Vincent Morris, and I have worked as an evidence clerk for the Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for 11 years. My job is simple: catalog personal effects from closed cases, maintain chain of custody, and ensure that everything is properly stored or returned to families. I handle wedding rings that no one claims, wallets with photos of children who will never see their parents again, clothing stained with the final moments of someone's life. You learn to separate yourself from it. You learn to see objects, not stories. Box 19F came up during a routine archive review. We were clearing out storage from the 1980s, preparing to digitize old records. The box was marked Case 1987-0294, Suicide, Personal Effects, No NOK, No Next of Kin. That meant everything inside would eventually be destroyed. I pulled the box from the shelf on a Tuesday afternoon in late April. It was lighter than I expected. I carried it to my desk, logged it into the system, and opened it. Inside, one wallet, brown leather, worn at the edges, one key ring with 3 keys, one wristwatch, stopped at 9:47, one pack of cigarettes half empty, and one Polaroid photograph. I picked up the Polaroid first. That was my mistake. The image was faded, the colors muted the way old Polaroids get. It showed a hallway, institutional, fluorescent lights, pale green walls, the kind of hallway you would find in a hospital or a government building. In the background, barely visible, was a door with a small rectangular window. It took me a moment to recognize it, but when I did, my hands went cold. It was this building, the medical examiner's office. The photograph showed the hallway, on the basement level, the same hallway I walked down every day, the same door at the end, the same window. I flipped the Polaroid over. On the back, written in black ink, was a date, March 19th, 1987, and below that, 2 words, last night. I looked at the image again. The hallway was empty. The lights were on. Nothing unusual, nothing strange, just a photograph of a hallway. Then I saw the figure. In the far corner of the image, half hidden in shadow near the door, there was someone standing, not clearly, just a silhouette, a shape, but something about the posture, the angle of the shoulders, made me look closer. The figure was wearing a coat, long, dark, familiar. I looked down at my own coat, draped over the back of my chair, same cut, same length, same collar. I told myself it was a coincidence. Coats like that were common, standard office wear. There was no reason to think it was mine, but I could not stop staring at the photograph. I checked the case file. The victim's name was Sarah Delaney, 32 years old, found in her apartment on March 20th, 1987. Cause of death, self-inflicted gunshot wound. No note, no warning signs. The case had been closed within a week. The photograph had been taken the night before she died. March 19th. In this building, I looked at the evidence log. The Polaroid had been found in her apartment, on her bedside table. No explanation for why she had it. No connection to the medical examiner's office in the case notes. It had been logged as a personal effect and filed away. I should have put it back in the box. I should have logged it as reviewed and moved on. But I did not. I took the Polaroid to the basement. I stood in the hallway, in the exact spot where the photograph had been taken. I held it up, comparing the image to the real space. Everything matched: the lights, the walls, the door, even the angle. I walked toward the door at the end of the hall. It led to the old archive room, a space we rarely used anymore. I opened it. The room was dark. I flipped the light switch. The room was empty, just rows of metal shelving and old filing cabinets. I stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and old paper. I heard the door close behind me, not slam, just a soft, deliberate click. I turned around. The door was shut. I tried the handle. It did not move. Locked. I knocked. No one answered. I called out. The hallway was empty. I took out my phone. No signal. We were too far underground. I stood there in the dim light, and I felt it. The certainty that I was not alone. I looked around the room. Nothing moved, nothing changed, but I could feel it, a presence watching. I turned back to the door and I saw it. Pressed against the small rectangular window from the outside was a face, pale, indistinct, just the outline of features, eyes, nose, mouth, staring at me. I stepped back. The face did not move. It just watched. I looked down at the Polaroid, still clutched in my hand. I looked at the figure in the corner of the photograph, the one in the coat, and I realized the figure was not outside the frame. It was inside the building, standing in the hallway, looking at the camera. The person who took this photograph had been standing where I was standing now, in the archive room, looking out, and the figure in the coat had been standing where that face was now, in the hallway, looking in. I heard the lock click. The door swung open. The hallway was empty. I walked out. I did not run. I did not look back. I carried the Polaroid back to my desk, placed it in the box, sealed the box, and logged it as complete. I filed it back on the shelf. Box 19F, Case 1987 0294. I have not touched it since, but I think about it. I think about Sarah Delaney, standing in that archive room the night before she died, taking a photograph of an empty hallway. I think about what she saw in that hallway, what she was documenting. I think about the figure in the coat, the one that looks like me. And I think about the face in the window, the one that was not there when I turned around, the one that should not have been there at all. I don't go to the basement anymore. I requested a transfer to the upper level offices. When they ask why, I tell them my knees are bad, that the stairs are too much. But the truth is simpler. I do not want to walk down that hallway. I do not want to stand in that spot. I do not want to see what Sarah Delaney saw the night before she died, because I know now. I know what happens when you stand in that room and look out through that window. You see yourself standing in the hallway, wearing your coat, staring back, and you realize you have always been there. You have always been standing in that hallway, watching, waiting. You just did not know it yet. Wounds tell stories. That is what they teach you in forensic photography. Every bruise has a timeline. Every laceration has a cause. Every mark on the body is evidence waiting to be decoded. You learn to read them like a language. You learn to see past the trauma and find the truth. But sometimes the wound is not finished telling its story. My name is Jenna Caldwell, and I have worked as a forensic technician for the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office in Chicago, Illinois, for 7 years. I photograph the dead. I document their injuries. I create the visual record that will follow them through the legal system, through the investigation, through the final determination of how they died. It is meticulous work. It is careful work. And it is supposed to be one directional. The dead do not touch you back. The Jane Doe came in on a Wednesday morning in early March. No identification. Found in an alley off West Madison Street. Estimated age, late 20s. Cause of death appeared to be strangulation, but there were defensive wounds on her hands and forearms. Cuts. Shallow, precise, clustered around the wrists. I was assigned to photograph her before the autopsy. Standard protocol. I set up my equipment in the exam room, adjusted the lights, and began the documentation process. I started with the overall images, full body, front and back. Then I moved to the details, the ligature marks on her neck, the bruising on her upper arms, the small contusions on her knuckles where she had fought back. Then I photographed her wrists. The cuts were clean, defensive wounds, most likely from a blade. 7 on the left wrist, 4 on the right. I documented each one, measuring the length, noting the depth, capturing the angle. It was routine, clinical, just another set of injuries in a long catalog of violence. I finished the documentation at 11:30 in the morning. I logged the images, labeled them by body region, and uploaded them to the case file. Case number 3291, Jane Doe, unidentified. I went to lunch. I did not think about her again. The next morning, I was reviewing the images at my desk when I noticed something I had missed. On the Jane Doe's left wrist, just below the cluster of defensive wounds, there was another cut, smaller, shallower, almost invisible in the harsh lighting of the exam room. I zoomed in on the image. The cut was fresh, recent. The edges were clean, not jagged. It had not been there during my initial examination. I was certain of it. I pulled up the case file. No mention of an additional wound. No addendum to the autopsy notes. I checked the timestamp on the photograph. 11:17 a.m. I had taken that photo. I had been standing right there, less than 2 feet away from her wrist, and I had not seen that cut. I told myself I had made a mistake, that I had missed it, that the lighting had been poor, or I had been distracted, or I had simply overlooked it in the catalog of other injuries. But I could not shake the feeling that the cut had not been there. I went to the exam room. The Jane Doe had already been moved to cold storage, but her file was still on the counter. I opened it. I looked at the autopsy notes. The pathologist had documented 7 cuts on the left wrist, not 8. I counted the cuts in my photograph. 8. I checked the image metadata. The photo had not been edited. No alterations, no manipulation, just a standard forensic photograph, time-stamped and logged. I went to cold storage. I found the Jane Doe in drawer 23. I pulled back the sheet. I looked at her left wrist. 8 cuts. The small one was there, faint, fresh, exactly where it appeared in my photograph. I called the pathologist, Dr. Singh, and asked if she had noticed an additional wound during the autopsy. She checked her notes. She said no. 7 cuts. She was certain. I asked her to look again. She came down to cold storage. She examined the wrist. She counted. 8 cuts. She looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us said anything. That night, I went home and tried to forget about it. I told myself wounds could be missed, that documentation was not perfect, that small details could slip through, but I kept thinking about that 8th cut, the one that had not been there, the one that appeared between my initial exam and my photograph. I went to bed early. I fell asleep just after 10. I woke up at 3 in the morning with a burning sensation on my left wrist. I turned on the light. There was a cut, shallow, clean, exactly where the 8th cut had been on the Jane Doe. I had not felt it happen. I had not touched anything sharp. I had been asleep. I stared at the cut. It was fresh. The edges were clean. It looked exactly like the cuts I had photographed the day before. I went to the bathroom. I washed it. I bandaged it. I told myself it was a coincidence, that I had scraped my wrist on something during the day and had not noticed, that the pain had woken me up. Nothing more, but I knew. Deep down, I knew. I went back to work the next day. I did not mention the cut. I did not show anyone. I just kept my sleeve pulled down and went about my work. At lunch, I pulled back the bandage. The cut was deeper, not by much, just a fraction of a millimeter, but it was definitely deeper than it had been that morning. I checked my phone. I had taken a photograph of the cut when I first woke up, just to document it. I compared the image to the wound on my wrist. The cut in the photograph was shallower. The cut on my wrist was deeper. It was growing. I went back to cold storage. I pulled the Jane Doe from drawer 23. I looked at her wrist. The 8th cut was gone. I counted again, 7 cuts, just like Dr. Singh had documented, just like the original autopsy notes. The 8th cut had vanished. I looked at my own wrist. The cut was still there, still fresh, still clean. I pulled out my phone. I found the photograph I had taken of the Jane Doe's wrist the day before. I zoomed in. The 8th cut was there, clear, documented, time-stamped, but it was not on her body anymore. It was on mine. I left the exam room. I went to my car. I sat in the parking lot and stared at my wrist. The cut throbbed, not painfully, just a dull, persistent ache, like it was reminding me it was there. I called in sick the next day, and the day after that. I did not go back to work for a week. The cut did not heal. It did not grow. It just stayed, a shallow, clean line across my left wrist, exactly where the Jane Doe had been cut, exactly where I had photographed her. I do not photograph defensive wounds anymore. I requested a reassignment to administrative work. When they asked why, I told them I needed a change. They did not push, but I still check my wrist every morning. I still look for new cuts, new marks, new wounds that do not belong to me, because I know now, I know what happens when you document the dead too closely, when you look too long at their injuries, when you catalog their pain. It does not stay with them. It follows you, and sometimes, late at night, I feel it. a faint burning sensation on my wrist, on my arm, on my neck. And I wonder, how many photographs did I take? How many wounds did I document? How many are waiting to appear? I do not photograph the dead anymore. I do not go near the exam room, but the cut is still there, on my left wrist, exactly where it was on hers. And I know, eventually, there will be more. Empty drawers do not make noise. That is a rule I learned on my first night shift, and it held true for 8 months. Then drawer 12 started opening. My name is Kyle Brennan, and I have worked as a night attendant at the Riverside County Medical Examiner's Office in Riverside, California, for 8 months. The job is simple: monitor the facility overnight, maintain the cold storage units, log any deliveries from transport, and make sure nothing goes wrong in the quiet hours between midnight and 8 in the morning. Most nights, nothing does. The building settles, the refrigeration units hum, the fluorescent lights buzz softly in the empty hallways. You learn to appreciate the silence. Drawer 12 had been empty since I started working there. It sat in the middle row of cold storage bay 2 between drawer 11, which cycled bodies regularly, and drawer 13, which had a faulty latch we kept meaning to fix. Drawer 12 just stayed empty. I asked my supervisor, a woman named Patricia, who had been running the night operations for over a decade, why we never used it. She said it was being kept open for overflow. That was all. I did not think about it again until the night I heard it open. It was 2:47 in the morning on a Tuesday in late September. I was at the front desk, filling out maintenance logs, when I heard the sound. A soft metallic scrape, followed by the hollow thunk of a drawer sliding to its full extension. It came from cold storage bay 2. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps echoing on the tile floor, and pushed open the door to the bay. The lights were on. They were always on. I scanned the rows of drawers. Everything looked normal. Then I saw it. Drawer 12 was open, not all the way, just 6 inches. Enough to see the darkness inside. I walked over to it. I looked inside. Empty, just the bare metal shelf, clean and unmarked. I pushed the drawer closed. It slid smoothly, the latch clicking into place. I checked the handle, secure. I went back to the desk. I made a note in the log. Drawer 12 opened on its own. Latch checked, secure. The next night at 2:47, it happened again. Same sound, same drawer, same 6 inches of empty darkness. This time, I did not just close it. I locked it. We had mechanical locks on some of the older drawers, simple bolt systems that required a key. I found the key in Patricia's desk drawer, went back to cold storage bay 2, and locked drawer 12. I turned the key until I felt the bolt slide home. I tested the handle. It did not move. I went back to the desk. I waited at 2:47. The next morning, I heard the scrape again. I walked to cold storage bay 2. The door was still closed. I pushed it open. Drawer 12 was open, 6 inches, still locked. The bolt was still in place. The key was still in my pocket, but the drawer was open. I stood there, staring at it, and I felt the temperature drop, not gradually, all at once. My breath misted in front of me. The refrigeration units were set to 38 degrees. This was colder, much colder. I closed the drawer. I turned the key. I locked it again. I pulled on the handle. It did not budge. I sat in a chair in the hallway and I watched drawer 12 for the rest of the night. I did not leave. I did not look away. I watched that drawer for 5 straight hours. It did not open, but the next night at 2:47, I heard the sound again, and when I went to check, drawer 12 was open. I stopped locking it after that. There was no point. Whatever was opening it did not care about locks. I started documenting it instead. I set up a camera on a tripod in the corner of the room, aimed directly at drawer 12. I let it run overnight. I wanted proof. I wanted evidence that I was not imagining it. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. I watched the timestamp roll forward. 2:46, 2:47. The drawer did not move. The room was completely still. No breeze, no vibration, nothing. But at 2:47 and 18 seconds, the drawer was open. The footage did not show it opening. One frame, it was closed. The next frame, it was open. I played it back frame by frame. There was no transition, no movement. The drawer was simply closed in one frame and open in the next. I called Patricia. I showed her the footage. She watched it 3 times without saying anything. Then she turned to me and said, "Do not go near drawer 12 when it opens." I asked her why. She said, "Because the last person who did never came back to work." I did not ask what she meant. I did not want to know. But I kept watching every night. I sat in that hallway and I watched drawer 12 open at 2:47, and every night I left it alone until the night I saw the handprint. It was a Thursday, 3 weeks after the drawer had started opening. I went to cold storage bay 2 at my usual time, just after 2:30, and I waited. At 2:47, the drawer opened. 6 inches, same as always. I stood up. I walked toward it. I told myself I was just going to close it. That was all. Just close it and go back to the desk. I reached for the handle. I pulled the drawer closed, and that was when I felt it. The cold. Not from the refrigeration units, not from the air, from inside the drawer. A wave of cold so intense it felt like it was pulling at me, like something inside the drawer was reaching out, trying to drag me in. I stepped back. I looked at my hand. My fingers were white. Frost had formed on my knuckles. I looked at the drawer. It was closed. The latch was secure, but I could still feel the cold radiating from it. I walked around to the side. I knelt down. I looked at the exterior of the drawer, the part that faced the hallway when it was closed. There was a handprint, small, fresh. Frost had outlined the edges of the fingers, delicate and precise. I touched it. The frost was cold, wet. It melted under my fingertips. The handprint was on the inside of the drawer door, the part that only existed when the drawer was open. I stood up. I backed away. I did not close drawer 12 again. The next night, I brought a thermometer. I waited until 2:47. The drawer opened. I aimed the infrared thermometer at the interior of the drawer. -12 degrees Fahrenheit. inside a refrigeration unit set to 38. I measured the air around the drawer, 39 degrees, normal. I measured the interior again, -15. The temperature was dropping. Inside the drawer, while it was open, I stepped back. I watched. The drawer stayed open for exactly 4 minutes. Then at 2:51, it slid closed on its own, smooth, silent, no sound. I checked the thermometer reading from inside the bay. 38 degrees, normal. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the hallway, staring at drawer 12, and I thought about the handprint, small, delicate, like a child's hand. The next night, I did not wait in the hallway. I went to Patricia's office. I found the old personnel files. I went back to the year 2003, the year the building had been renovated. I found a report, a complaint from a night attendant named Michael Torres. He had reported hearing sounds from cold storage bay 2, specifically from drawer 12. The report was dated October 15th, 2003. There was a note at the bottom, written in red ink. Employee terminated, did not return to work after October 17th. I looked for Michael Torres in the employee database. No record, no forwarding address, no contact information. I looked for any incidents on October 17th, 2003. Nothing in the logs, nothing in the reports. But there was one entry, a single line in the cold storage maintenance log. Drawer 12 decommissioned. Do not use. I have been working at the Riverside County Medical Examiner's office for 8 months. I have watched drawer 12 open every night at 2:47 in the morning for the last 3 weeks. I have seen the handprint. I have measured the temperature. I have documented everything, but I have not opened that drawer all the way. I have not looked inside when it is fully extended, and I never will, because last night at 2:47, when the drawer opened, I heard something, faint, barely audible, breathing, slow, steady, coming from inside the empty drawer. I do not work the night shift anymore. I requested a transfer to the day operations. Patricia did not ask why, but sometimes, late at night, I think about drawer 12. I think about the handprint, the cold, the breathing, and I think about Michael Torres, the night attendant who did not return to work. I wonder if he is still there, inside drawer 12, waiting, waiting for someone to open it all the way. Evidence is permanent. Once it is recorded, it cannot be unheard. That is what I believed for 17 years, until I listened to the tape from Interview Room C. My name is Detective Lorna Wade, and I have worked in the Cold Case Division of the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office in San Jose, California, for 17 years. My job is to revisit unsolved crimes, re-examine evidence with modern technology, and find answers that were missed the first time. Most cases stay cold because witnesses die, memories fade, or crucial evidence was never properly documented. But sometimes the evidence was always there. You just were not listening closely enough. The case came across my desk on a Monday morning in late October. Case number 1989-0473, a homicide from October 3rd, 1989. Victim Maria Contreras, 28 years old, found strangled in her apartment on Willow Street. Suspect Raymond Voss, 34, arrested 2 days later based on witness statements. He confessed during interrogation. The case was closed within a week. Voss died in prison in 2007. The case should have stayed closed, but the victim's sister had recently hired a private investigator who claimed there were inconsistencies in the confession. The district attorney's office requested a review. That meant digitizing the old evidence, including the interrogation tapes. I sent the cassette tapes to our tech department. They converted them to digital files and uploaded them to the case server. 3 hours of interrogation spread across 4 cassette tapes. I downloaded the files and began listening. The first tape was procedural, Miranda rights, initial questions. Voss denied involvement. His voice was calm, measured, almost bored. The detective conducting the interview, a man named Sergeant William Marks, was patient but persistent. The second tape was where Voss started to break. His voice cracked. He admitted to being near the victim's apartment. He admitted to knowing her. He admitted to arguing with her. The third tape was the confession, full, detailed, unambiguous. He described the crime. He described her apartment. He described what he had done. Sergeant Marks asked clarifying questions. Voss answered everyone. It was textbook, clean, convincing. I was about to move on to the fourth tape when I noticed the timestamp. The third tape ended at 19 minutes and 42 seconds. The fourth tape started at 23 minutes and 8 seconds. There was a gap. 3 minutes and 26 seconds of missing audio. I checked the case notes. No mention of a break in the interrogation. No mention of anyone leaving the room. The tapes were supposed to be continuous. I called the tech department and asked if there had been an error in the conversion. They checked. No error. The gap existed on the original cassette tape. Someone had stopped recording. I played the fourth tape. It picked up. Mid-sentence, Sergeant Marks was asking Voss to sign a written statement. Voss agreed. The tape ended. Case closed. But I could not stop thinking about the gap. 3 minutes and 26 seconds. What had happened in that room? I went to the evidence locker and pulled the original cassette tapes. I wanted to hear them myself on the original equipment to see if there was something the digitization had missed. I found an old cassette player in storage. I loaded the third tape and let it play. Sergeant Marks, Raymond Voss, the confession. Everything matched the digital file. Then, at 19 minutes and 42 seconds, the tape stopped. Not a clean stop, a pause, like someone had pressed the pause button. I waited. The tape sat in silence. No sound, no hiss, just silence. Then at 19 minutes and 58 seconds, I heard it. A voice, faint, barely audible, whispered, "She is still here." I stopped the tape. I rewound it. I played it again. "She is still here." It was a woman's voice, soft, calm, unfamiliar. I checked the case notes. No woman had been present during the interrogation. It was just Sergeant Marks and Raymond Voss. Interview Room C, October 5th, 1989. I kept listening. The voice came again. A few seconds later, "She is watching." Then, at 20 minutes and 34 seconds, the tape resumed. Sergeant Marks asked Voss to sign the statement. The interrogation continued. I played the gap again and again. The voice was always there, quiet, persistent, speaking during the pause in the recording. I pulled the interrogation transcript, the official record of everything said, in interview room C. I went to the 19-minute mark. There was a note in the margin, handwritten in blue ink. Pause. Suspect heard noise. Requested water. I kept reading. Below the note, in smaller handwriting, was a single sentence. Suspect claimed he heard a woman's voice, no one else present. I went back to the tape. I listened to the pause again. This time, I turned the volume all the way up. She is still here. She is watching. She knows what you did. 3 sentences, clear, deliberate, spoken by a woman who should not have been in the room. I checked the layout of interview room C. Small, windowless, soundproof, 1 door, 1 table, 2 chairs, a tape recorder mounted on the wall. I checked the case file for any mention of audio anomalies. Nothing, just the handwritten note in the transcript. I called the district attorney's office and asked if Sergeant Marks was still alive. He was not. He had died in 2012. Heart attack. I searched for anyone else who had worked the case. The only other person listed was a records clerk named Janet Ruiz. I found her contact information. She had retired in 2015. I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring. I identified myself and asked if she remembered case 1989 0473. She was quiet for a long time, then she said the Contreras case. I asked her if she remembered anything unusual about the interrogation. She said, Voss heard a voice. He kept saying there was a woman in the room. Marks told him to shut up. I asked her if she had listened to the tapes. She said, once, right after they were logged into evidence. I asked her what she heard. She said, the same thing Voss heard, a woman's voice, whispering. I asked her if she reported it. She said, I told Marks. He said it was interference from the recorder. He told me not to mention it in the file. I asked her if she remembered what the voice said. She was quiet again. Then she said Maria was still there, in the room, watching. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat at my desk and I stared at the cassette tape. Maria Contreras, the victim, dead for 34 years. I went back to the evidence locker. I found the crime scene photographs. I looked at the images of her apartment, the bedroom, the living room, the kitchen. In the corner of one photograph, on the kitchen counter, was a small tape recorder, the kind people used in the 80s to record memos or music. I checked the evidence log. The tape recorder had been collected as evidence. It was stored in the same locker as the interrogation tapes. I found it, an old cassette recorder, black plastic, worn buttons. There was a tape inside. I pressed play, static, then a woman's voice, calm, clear, familiar. If you are listening to this, it means I am gone. If you are listening to this, it means Raymond found me. The voice continued. Maria Contreras, recording her own message, dated October 2nd, 1989, the day before she died. She described her fear. She described Raymond's threats. She described the feeling of being watched, of knowing that something terrible was going to happen. And then, at the end of the tape, she said, If he kills me, I will not leave. I will stay. I will watch him. I will make sure he knows. The tape ended. I sat there, staring at the recorder, and I felt the air in the room grow cold. I went back to the interrogation tape. I listened to the pause again. She is still here. She is watching. She knows what you did. The voice was the same. Maria Contreras. Speaking during the interrogation, speaking to Raymond Voss, speaking from the tape recorder that should have been silent, locked in an evidence locker miles away from interview room C. I checked the transcript again. The note in the margin. Suspect claimed he heard a woman's voice. He had. He had heard her, and so had I. I filed my report. I documented the audio anomaly. I included the transcript note, the witness statement from Janet Ruiz, and the recording from Maria's tape. The district attorney's office reviewed it. They concluded that the confession was valid. The case remained closed, but I kept the cassette tape, the one from interview room C. I keep it in my desk drawer. I have not listened to it again. Because last week, late at night, I heard something in my office, a faint whisper, just barely audible. She is still here. I do not work late anymore. I do not listen to old tapes alone, and I do not go near interview room C, even though it has been renovated, even though the old tape recorder is gone. Because I know now, some voices do not stop when the recording ends. They just wait for someone to listen. Records do not lie. They are fixed, permanent, immune to the distortions of memory and time. A burial plot either exists or it does not. A grave is either registered or it is not. There is no ambiguity until there is. My name is Anita Reyes, and I have worked as a records clerk for Meadowbrook Cemetery in Portland, Oregon for 14 years. I maintain the burial registry, update plot maps, coordinate with funeral directors, and ensure that every interment is properly documented. The work is meticulous. It requires precision, and it depends on the fundamental assumption that the cemetery itself does not change. The discrepancy appeared on a Tuesday morning in early November. I was updating the digital burial registry, transferring handwritten records from the 1970s into our database when I came across an entry that did not match the plot map. The entry read, Plot 14, Row C, Interment, November 9th, 1974. Name, unknown, no marker. I checked the current plot map. Row C had 13 plots, not 14. The row started at plot 1 and ended at plot 13. There was no plot 14. I assumed it was a clerical error. Someone had written the wrong row. I checked row D, no plot 14, listed for November 9th, 1974. I checked row B, nothing. I pulled the original handwritten ledger from storage. The entry was there, written in faded black ink. Plot 14, row C. I called the cemetery superintendent, a man named Gerald Moss, who had been managing Meadowbrook for over 20 years. I asked him about row C. He confirmed what I already knew. 13 plots. Always had been. I asked him to check the physical layout. He said he would walk the grounds. An hour later, he called me back. Row C has 13 plots, he said. I counted them myself. I asked him if there had ever been a plot 14. He said no. He said the cemetery had been laid out in 1953 and the plot numbering had never changed. I thanked him. I hung up. I stared at the handwritten entry in the ledger, Plot 14, Row C, November 9th, 1974. I decided to check the burial permits. Every interment requires a permit filed with the county. If someone had been buried in Plot 14, there would be a permit. I called the county clerk's office. I requested all burial permits for Meadowbrook Cemetery from November of 1974. They sent me the records. I went through them one by one. No permit for Plot 14, Row C. No permit for an unknown burial on November 9th, nothing. I went back to the ledger. I checked the entries before and after November 9th. Everything was in order. The handwriting was consistent. The dates were sequential, but Plot 14, Row C, should not exist. I called Gerald again. I told him about the burial permits. I asked him if it was possible that someone had been interred without proper documentation. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, in 1974, possible. The records were not as strict back then, but we would still have a plot. I asked him to check Row C again, physically, plot by plot. He called me back 2 hours later. His voice was different, quieter. Anita, I need you to come to the cemetery. I drove out to Meadowbrook. Gerald was waiting for me at the entrance to Section B, where Row C was located. He did not say anything. He just walked. I followed. Row C ran parallel to a line of oak trees, 13 plots, each marked with a headstone or a flat marker. Gerald walked to the end of the row. He stopped at plot 13. Then he pointed to the ground beyond it. There was a depression, slight, barely visible through the grass, about 6 feet long, 3 feet wide. That was not here this morning, Gerald said. I knelt down. I pressed my hand against the grass. The ground felt soft, loose, like it had been disturbed recently. I asked Gerald if anyone had been working in this area. He said no. No burials, no maintenance. Row C had not been touched in months. I stood up. I looked at the depression. It was in the exact position where Plot 14 would be. Gerald said, I am calling the groundskeepers. We need to check if this is a sinkhole. The groundskeepers arrived an hour later. 3 men with shovels and a probe rod. They tested the ground. The probe rod sank easily, too easily. One of the groundskeepers, a man named Tom, who had worked at Meadowbrook for 30 years, said, This is not a sinkhole. This is a grave. They started digging, carefully, slowly. 6 inches down, they hit resistance, not rock, not clay, wood. They cleared away the soil, a wooden board, old, rotted, part of a casket lid. Gerald told them to stop. He called the police. The police came. They called the medical examiner. The medical examiner called a forensic team. By late afternoon, the site was cordoned off with yellow tape. They excavated carefully. The casket was old, plain pine, no nameplate, no markings. It had been buried shallow, less than 3 feet deep. Inside was a body, skeletal, partially decomposed. Clothing remnants suggested the 1970s. No identification, No personal effects. The forensic team estimated the burial had occurred sometime between 1970 and 1980, consistent with the ledger entry, November 9th, 1974. But there was no record of this burial, no permit, no death certificate, no family, nothing. The police launched an investigation. They checked missing persons reports from the 70s. They ran dental records. They analyzed the remains. No matches, no leads. The body was classified as unknown. The grave was documented. The case was filed as a cold case. But I could not stop thinking about the ledger entry. Someone had written it. Someone had known. November 9th, 1974, Plot 14, Row C. I went back to the cemetery records. I looked for any other anomalies, any other entries that, did not match the plot maps. I found 3 more. Plot 9, Row F. Entry dated June 3rd, 1968. The plot did not exist. Plot 22, Row A. Entry dated December 15th, 1979. The plot did not exist. Plot 7, Row H. Entry dated March 11th, 1982. The plot did not exist. I called Gerald. I told him what I had found. He did not want to hear it. He said, "Anita, let it go. We found one. That is enough." But I could not let it go. I called the groundskeepers. I asked them to check Plot 9, Row F. They called me back 3 hours later. "There is a depression," Tom said, "same as Row C." I asked them to check Plot 22, Row A. Same thing. A depression, soft ground, evidence of a burial. I asked them to check Plot 7, Row H. Same. Gerald shut down the investigation. He said we were not digging up the entire cemetery based on ledger entries. The police agreed. Without evidence of foul play, there was no justification. But I kept the ledger, I kept the entries, and I kept checking. Last month, I found another entry, Plot 31, Row J. Entry dated October 2nd, 2006. No plot existed. I called Tom. I asked him to check the ground. He did not want to. He said, "Anita, some things are better left buried." But I insisted. He checked. There was a depression. I went to the cemetery. I stood at the edge of Row J. I looked at the depression, and I realized something. The entry in the ledger was dated October 2nd, 2006. But the ledger only went up to 1995. I had checked. The last entry was from November of 1995. I went back to my office. I pulled the ledger from the shelf. I opened it to the last page. There was a new entry, written in the same faded black ink as the others. Plot 31, Row J. Interment, October 2nd, 2006. Name, unknown. No marker. The handwriting was identical to the entries from the 70s and 80s. The same person, the same pen, but that was impossible. The ledger had been closed for 30 years. I looked at the date, October 2nd, 2006. I checked my own records. There had been no burials at Meadowbrook on that date. But someone had been buried, somewhere, in a plot that did not exist. I closed the ledger. I put it back on the shelf. I have not opened it since, because I know now the cemetery is not fixed. The plots are not permanent. The graves appear when they are ready, when they are remembered, and the ledger records them. Always has, always will. I do not update the digital registry anymore. I do not transfer old entries. I leave the ledger closed because I know eventually there will be another entry, another plot that does not exist, another grave waiting to be found. And one day I will open that ledger and I will see my own name written in faded black ink. Plot unknown, row unknown, interment, date unknown, name, Anita Reyes, no marker. I do not want to know when that day will come. I do not want to see the entry. So I leave the ledger closed, and I hope when the time comes, someone else will open it. Someone else will find the plot. Someone else will dig, because I will already be there, waiting. Some names should stay forgotten. I learned that the hard way, and now I hear mine whispered every night at 3 in the morning. My name is Miles Chen, and I have worked as a digital archivist for the San Francisco County Medical Examiner's Office in San Francisco, California, for 9 years. My job is to preserve history. I scan old case files, convert handwritten documents into searchable text, and ensure that decades of records are not lost to time or decay. It is quiet work, solitary, the kind of work where you spend your days alone with the dead, reading their stories, documenting their final moments. You learn to keep a professional distance. You learn not to get attached. The file arrived in my scanning queue on a Monday morning in late October. Case number 1963 1178. A homicide from March of 1963. The file was thick, the pages yellowed and brittle, held together with rusted paper clips and dried out rubber bands. I opened it carefully. The cover page was standard. Date, case number, victim classification. But where the victim's name should have been, there was only a thick black line. Redacted. I checked the next page. The autopsy report. Every mention of the victim's name had been blacked out with heavy marker. Same with the witness statements. Same with the detective's notes. Every instance of the name had been systematically removed. I had seen redacted files before, usually for minors or witnesses in ongoing investigations or cases involving national security. But this was a closed case from 1963. There was no reason for the name to be hidden. I checked the case summary. Female victim, age 24, cause of death, strangulation. Suspect, unknown. Status, unsolved. I scanned the pages as they were, redactions intact, and uploaded them to the digital archive. Then I made a note in the file. Victim name redacted throughout. Reason unknown. I should have left it at that. But I was curious. I wanted to know why someone had gone through an entire case file and removed every instance of a name. I started digging. I checked the original intake log from March of 1963. The victim was listed by case number only. No name. I checked the burial records. No name. I checked the newspaper archives. There were articles about the murder, but every article referred to the victim as an unidentified woman. But she had been identified. The file contained witness statements, family notifications. Someone had known her name. I went back to the file. I examined the redactions more closely. They were not consistent. Some were made with a thick black marker. Others were made with correction fluid. A few were physically cut out of the page, leaving rectangular holes in the paper. On one page, near the bottom, the redaction had been done hastily. The black marker had not fully covered the text. I could see the faint outline of letters beneath it. I held the page up to the light. The letters were barely visible, but they were there. I could make out part of a first name. L, that was all. The rest was obliterated. I kept searching. On another page, a detective's note. There was a small yellow post-it note stuck to the margin. It looked old. The adhesive had dried out. The note was barely hanging on. I peeled it off carefully. The handwriting was faded, written in blue ink. It said, "Do not say it out loud." That was all. No signature, no date, just that one sentence. I stared at the note. I looked at the redacted name. I felt something shift in the room. The air felt heavier, colder. I told myself it was just a warning from a previous archivist, a reminder to keep the victim's name confidential, nothing more. But I could not stop thinking about it. Do not say it out loud. I went back to the file. I examined every page. I found the 3 more partial letters beneath the redactions. Combined with the first fragment, I had L-Ra-N. I started guessing. Eleanor, Elaine, Elizabeth. None of them felt right. I checked the census records from 1963. I cross-referenced young women who had gone missing in San Francisco in March of that year. I found 12 names. None of them matched the partial letters I had. Then I found an old police blotter, a handwritten log from the precinct that had handled the case. In the margin, next to the case number, someone had written a full name. Elara Winslow. I stared at the name. I said it in my head. Elara Winslow. It fit the letters. It felt right. I should have stopped there. I should have closed the file and moved on, but I wanted to confirm it. I wanted to see if the name matched. I said it out loud. Elara Winslow. The lights in my office flickered, just once. I told myself it was a power surge. Old building, old wiring, nothing unusual. I went home that night and did not think about it again. At 3 in the morning, I woke up to a sound, a soft knock on my apartment door. 3 times, deliberate, measured. I got out of bed. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I went back to bed. The knocking came again. 3 knocks, same rhythm. I opened the door. The hallway was still empty. The building was silent. I closed the door. I went back to bed. I did not sleep. The next night, at 3 in the morning, the knocking came again. 3 knocks. I did not answer. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. After the 3rd knock, I heard something else. A voice, faint, whispered, coming from the hallway. Miles. My name, spoken by someone I could not see. I got up. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. The voice came again. Miles. Closer this time, right outside the door. I did not open it. I backed away. I sat on my couch, and I waited for morning. The knocking has come every night since then. 3 knocks, always at 3 in the morning, always followed by my name, whispered through the door. I have not answered. I have not opened the door. but I know who it is. Ilara Winslow, the woman whose name was redacted, the woman I was told not to say out loud. I went back to the office. I pulled the file again. I looked at the post-it note. Do not say it out loud. I should have listened, but I did not. I said her name, and now she knows mine. Have tried everything. I moved to a different apartment. The knocking followed. I changed my phone number. The whispers continued. I requested a leave of absence from work. It did not matter. Every night at 3 in the morning, I hear the knocking, 3 deliberate knocks, and then my name whispered from the darkness. I called the previous archivist, a woman named Margaret, who had worked in my position before me. She retired 5 years ago. I asked her if she remembered case 1963 1178. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Did you say the name?" I told her I did. She hung up. I called her back. She did not answer. I left a message. She never returned my call. I went to the medical examiner's office. I found the old personnel files. I looked for anyone who had worked on case 1963 1178. There were 3 names, 2 detectives, 1 medical examiner. All 3 were dead. All 3 had died under unusual circumstances, 1 in a car accident, 1 from a fall, 1 from a heart attack in his sleep. I checked the dates. All 3 had died in March, the same month Ilara Winslow was killed. I checked the case file one more time. I found a final note written in the margin of the last page. It was in the same handwriting as the post-it. It said, "She comes for those who remember. She comes for those who speak." I closed the file. I have not opened it since, but the knocking continues. Every night, 3 knocks, my name whispered through the door. Last night, I heard something new. After the whisper, after my name, I heard another sound. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, walking away from my door. But this morning, when I left for work, I found something on my doorstep. A piece of paper, folded once, no envelope. I opened it. Inside, written in faded blue ink, was a single sentence. Do not say it out loud. The handwriting matched the post-it note from the file. Exactly. I do not know who left it. I do not know how they found me, but I know what it means. It is a warning, the same warning someone tried to give me before I said her name. But it is too late now. I already said it. I already called her, and now she knows where I am. The knocking will come again tonight at 3 in the morning, 3 deliberate knocks. My name whispered through the door, and one day I will open that door, not because I want to, but because I will have to. Because eventually the knocking will stop, the whispers will stop, and the silence will be worse. I will open the door, and Ilara Winslow will be standing there, waiting for me to say her name one more time. I do not work as an archivist anymore. I requested a transfer. They gave me a desk job, data entry. No files, no names, no history, but it does not matter. She found me once. She will find me again. Because I said her name. And some names, once spoken, can never be unheard. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of something waiting to be heard. I learned that in Cold Storage 3, and now I cannot unhear it. My name is Patricia Vance, and I have worked as the morgue supervisor for the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office in Houston, Texas for 22 years. I have managed facilities, coordinated autopsies, trained staff, and maintained equipment across 3 different buildings. I have seen every kind of death, every point of decay, every configuration of human remains that nature and violence can produce. None of it has disturbed me the way Cold Storage 3 disturbs me. The unit was installed in 1997, part of an expansion to accommodate the growing caseload. It was identical to Cold Storage 1 and 2, a walk-in refrigeration unit with 12 drawer slots, temperature controlled, humidity monitored, fully automated. For the first 8 years, it functioned perfectly. Then, in 2005, we had a compressor failure. The unit had to be shut down for repairs. When we brought it back online, something had changed. The first person to notice was a night attendant named Michael. He reported hearing a sound coming from inside the unit, a low hum. I told him it was the compressor. He said no, this was different. It sounded like someone humming a melody. I checked the unit myself. I heard the compressor. I heard the ventilation fans. I heard nothing else. I told Michael it was his imagination. He did not argue. But 2 weeks later, he requested a transfer to the day shift. 3 months later, another night attendant reported the same thing, a humming sound coming from Cold Storage 3 only at night, only when the building was quiet. I checked the unit again. I brought a decibel meter. I recorded the ambient sound. Nothing unusual, just the normal mechanical noise of a refrigeration system. But the reports kept coming. Different staff, different shifts, always the same description. A humming sound, like a melody, like someone singing softly. In 2008, we decommissioned Cold Storage 3. Officially, it was due to recurring maintenance issues. Unofficially, the staff refused to use it. Bodies were stored in Cold Storage 1 and 2. Cold Storage 3 remained empty. That should have been the end of it. But the humming continued, empty unit. No power to the internal lighting, minimal airflow to maintain the seal. Just the basic refrigeration compressor running on a low cycle. And still, at night, people heard it, the humming. I heard it for the first time on a Tuesday night in October of 2009. I was working late reviewing case files in my office when I heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. I walked to the cold storage corridor. The sound was coming from Cold Storage 3. I opened the door. The interior was dark, the air cold and still. The humming stopped. I closed the door. I stood in the hallway, listening for some minutes. Seconds later, the humming resumed, soft, melodic, almost soothing. I opened the door again. The humming stopped. I realized something. The humming only happened when the door was closed. When I opened it, the sound cut off immediately. I closed the door. I waited. The humming started again. I could hear it clearly now, even through the insulated door. A low, steady melody. No words, just a tune. I recognized it. It took me a moment, but I recognized it. A lullaby. Hush, little baby. The same song my mother had sung to me when I was a child. I stood there in the hallway, listening to that lullaby coming from an empty refrigeration unit, and I felt the temperature drop, not in the hallway, in my chest. A cold, creeping certainty that something was wrong. I called maintenance. I told them to check cold storage 3 for any acoustic anomalies. They came out the next day. They tested everything: the compressor, the fans, the door seals. They found nothing, but the humming continued. Every night, same melody, same lullaby. I started documenting it. I set up a recording device in the hallway outside Cold Storage 3. I let it run overnight. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. At 11:42 p.m., the humming started, clear, unmistakable, a woman's voice humming "Hush, Little Baby." At 3:17 a.m., the humming stopped. I played the recording for the maintenance team. They heard it. They could not explain it. One of them, a man named Jorge, who had been working for the county for 30 years, said, "You need to check the old case files, find out who was in that unit before it was shut down." I went back to the records. I pulled the logs from 2005, the year Cold Storage 3 was decommissioned. I looked at the last body stored in the unit before the compressor failed. Case number 2005 0932, female, age 26. Cause of death: complications from childbirth. Name: Rebecca Hale. Date of storage: August 14th, 2005. I checked the intake notes. Rebecca Hale had died during labor. The child had survived. The body had been held in Cold Storage 3 for 6 days while the family made arrangements. On August 20th, she was released for burial. I checked the burial records. Rebecca Hale was interred at Forest Lawn Cemetery on August 22nd, 2005. But something was wrong with the timeline. The compressor failure happened on August 18th. Cold Storage 3 was shut down on August 19th. Rebecca Hale should have been moved to Cold Storage 1 or 2 during the shutdown. I checked the transfer logs. No record of her being moved. According to the logs, she had stayed in Cold Storage 3 until her release on August 20th. But the unit had been offline. The refrigeration had been shut down. For 3 days, Rebecca Hale's body had been stored in a non-functioning cold storage unit. I called the funeral director who had handled the release. He was retired, but I found his contact information. I asked him if he remembered anything unusual about Rebecca Hale's body. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She was warm. When we picked her up, she should have been cold, but she was warm." I asked him if he reported it. He said, "I mentioned it to the staff. They said there had been a refrigeration issue. I did not push." I thanked him. I hung up. I sat at my desk and I thought about Rebecca Hale lying in a warm storage unit for 3 days, her body slowly decomposing while her infant child was in the hospital nursery 1 floor above her. I thought about the humming, the lullaby. "Hush, little baby." I went back to Cold Storage 3. I opened the door. The interior was dark and silent. I stood in the doorway and I said, "Rebecca?" The humming stopped completely. The unit was silent. I closed the door. I waited. The humming did not resume. I opened the door again. I stepped inside. The air was cold, but not as cold as it should have been. I looked at the temperature gauge, 42 degrees. It should have been 38. I said, Rebecca, I am sorry. I am sorry we left you here. I am sorry we did not move you. The lights flickered. Just once, the temperature dropped 38 degrees, exactly where it should be. I stepped back into the hallway. I closed the door. I have not opened it since. But the humming changed after that. It was no longer every night. It was sporadic, once a week, once a month, and the melody changed too. It was not always Hush, Little Baby. Sometimes it was Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Sometimes it was Rockabye Baby. And one night, 6 months ago, I heard a new sound, not humming, crying, soft, muffled, like a baby crying in the distance. I checked the logs, cold storage. 3 had been empty for 15 years. There was no body inside. There was no reason for any sound, but I heard it, a baby crying, coming from inside cold storage 3. I did not open the door. I did not investigate. I just stood in the hallway, listening to that sound, and I realized something. Rebecca Hale died during childbirth. Her baby survived, but she never got to hold her child. She never got to sing to her baby. She never got to say goodbye. And now, 15 years later, she is still here in cold storage 3, singing lullabies to a child she never knew. I do not work the night shift anymore. I requested a schedule change. I come in early and I leave before dark. But sometimes, when I am alone in the building, I hear it, faint, distant, a lullaby, humming through the walls. I do not investigate. I do not open cold storage 3. I just listen because I know now. She is not haunting us. She is not trying to scare us. She is just a mother singing to her child the way any mother would, and I cannot bring myself to make her stop. Last week, I received a call from Forest Lawn Cemetery. They said they were updating their records and needed to confirm the location of Rebecca Hale's grave. I gave them the plot number. They thanked me. Then, before they hung up, they said something strange. They said the grave had been visited recently. Someone had left flowers, fresh flowers, pink roses. I asked them when. They checked. August 14th, the anniversary of Rebecca's death. I asked them if they knew who left the flowers. They said no, but attached to the bouquet was a card. It said, "Thank you for singing to me. Love, Emma." Emma, Rebecca's daughter, the child who survived. I do not know how Emma knew. I do not know how she heard. But somehow she knew. Her mother was still singing, even after 15 years, even from inside cold storage 3. I have not told anyone this. I have not documented it. But I keep that information close, because now, when I hear the humming, I do not feel afraid. I feel something else. Gratitude for a mother who never stopped singing, or a child who never stopped listening. And I hope one day Rebecca Hale will finally rest. When she knows her daughter heard her, when she knows she was not forgotten. Until then, Cold Storage 3 will stay closed, the humming will continue, and I will listen the way Emma listened, because some lullabies are meant to last forever. You cannot pick up the same body twice. That is a fundamental rule of transport work. Once you deliver a body to the morgue, Your job is done. The dead do not call you back. Until they do. My name is Gabriel Torres, and I have worked as a medical transport driver for the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office in Atlanta, Georgia for 13 years. I drive a white van with no windows in the back, and I pick up bodies from crime scenes, hospitals, nursing homes, and accident sites. I bring them to the morgue. I log them in. I leave. It is simple work, repetitive, predictable. You learn the routes, you learn the protocols, you learn not to think too much about what you are carrying. The call came in at 11:37 p.m. on a Friday in late September, single vehicle accident on Interstate 75, northbound, near the Howell Mill Road exit. Female driver, no passengers, pronounced dead at the scene. I took the call, standard pickup. I arrived at the scene 20 minutes later. The car had hit a concrete barrier at high speed. The driver's side was crumpled. Police had already cleared the vehicle. The body was covered with a yellow tarp, lying on a stretcher beside the wreckage. I spoke with the officer in charge. He gave me the case number 2023 4791. Name Claire Dennison, age 32. Time of death 10:54 p.m. I loaded the body into the van. I secured the stretcher. I drove to the morgue. I arrived at 12:41 a.m. I wheeled Claire Dennison into the intake area. I logged her in. Case number 2023 4791. I left the paperwork on the intake desk and went home. At 2:18 a.m., my phone rang. Dispatch. Another pickup. Same location. Interstate 75, northbound, near Howell Mill Road. Single vehicle accident. Female driver. I told dispatch there was a mistake. I had already picked up that body 2 hours ago. Claire Dennison, case 4791. Dispatch checked the logs. They said there was no record of a pickup from that location tonight. They said the call had just come in from the police. They needed a driver immediately. I told them to check with the morgue. I had just delivered the body. They put me on hold. 3 minutes later, they came back. The morgue had no record of Claire Dennison, no intake logged for case 4791. I told them that was impossible. I had delivered her myself less than 2 hours ago. Dispatch said the police were waiting. I needed to respond to the scene. I drove back to Interstate 75. The accident site looked exactly the same. Same concrete barrier, same wreckage, same yellow tarp covering a body on a stretcher. I approached the officer in charge. A different officer this time, younger. I asked him about the victim. He checked his notes. Claire Dennison, age 32, time of death 10:54 p.m. I told him I had already picked her up 2 hours ago. He looked at me like I was confused. He said the accident had just been cleared. The body had just been released for transport. I looked at the stretcher. I pulled back the tarp. Same woman, same injuries, same everything. I asked the officer if there had been 2 accidents tonight. He said no, just this one. I loaded the body into the van. Same procedure, same case number, 2023 4791, Claire Dennison. I drove back to the morgue. I wheeled the stretcher into the intake area, the same intake area where I had delivered her 2 hours ago. I looked for the paperwork I had left on the desk. It was not there. I checked the intake log. No entry for Claire Dennison, no record of my earlier delivery. I logged her in and again. I filled out the same forms. I wrote the same case number. I left. I went to the cold storage bay. I needed to see if the first body was still there. I needed proof that I had delivered her the first time. I found the intake supervisor, a man named Greg, who had been working the overnight shift for years. I asked him if he had received a body around 12:45 a.m., case 4791, Claire Dennison. He checked the computer. He said no. The only Claire Dennison logged tonight was the one I had just brought in. At 2:43 a.m., I told him that was impossible. I had brought her in earlier. He showed me the security footage. The cameras covered the intake area. He pulled up the footage from 12:30 to 1 a.m. The intake area was empty. No one came in, no deliveries. I told him to check my van logs. Every time I enter or exit the morgue, the system logs my vehicle. The records would show I had been there twice tonight. He checked one entry, 2:41 a.m., no earlier entry. I went home. I did not sleep. I sat on my couch and I tried to understand what had happened. I had delivered that body. I remembered it, the weight of the stretcher, the sound of the wheels on the tile floor, the intake desk, the paperwork, but there was no record, no evidence, nothing. At 6:15 a.m., my phone rang. Dispatch, another pickup, Interstate 75, northbound, Howell Mill Road exit, single vehicle accident, female driver. I told them no. I told them I was not responding. They said it was urgent. The police needed a driver. I asked them for the case number. They read it to me, 2023-4791. I hung up. I called the morgue. I asked for Greg. I asked him if Claire Dennison was still in the cold storage bay. He checked. He said yes. Case 4791. Logged in at 2:43 a.m. Still there. I asked him to go look at the body, to physically confirm it was there. He put me on hold. 3 minutes later, he came back. He said the drawer was empty. I asked him what he meant. He said the drawer assigned to case 4791 was open, no body inside, no paperwork, nothing. I asked him to check the logs. He checked. No record of the body being moved, no release and authorization. It was just gone. I drove back to the accident site for the third time. Same location, same wreckage, same yellow tarp. I pulled back the tarp. Claire Dennison. Same woman, same injuries, but this time I noticed something. Her clothes were different. The first time she had been wearing a blue jacket. The second time, jeans and a gray sweater. This time, a black dress. Different clothes, same body, same accident. I asked the officer about the clothes. He looked at me strangely. He said she was wearing a black dress when they pulled her from the car. I loaded the body into the van. Third time, same case number, same name, same time of death. I drove to the morgue. I did not log her in. I left her in the van. I went to find Greg. I told him what was happening. I told him about the 3 pickups, the different clothes, the missing body. He did not believe me, but he agreed to check the van with me. We went to the parking lot. I opened the back of the van. The stretcher was there, but the body bag was unzipped, empty. I had secured it myself 10 minutes ago. It was zipped closed. I was certain. Greg looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us said anything. I checked the intake area. No body. I checked cold storage. No body. I checked the autopsy suite. No body. Claire Dennison was gone. Again. I went back to my van. I sat in the driver's seat and I stared at the empty stretcher in the back, and I realized something. I had not delivered Claire Dennison to the morgue. Not once, not twice, not 3 times. Every time I brought her in, she disappeared. Every time I logged her, the records vanished. Every time I turned around, she was gone. She was not supposed to be at the morgue. She was supposed to be somewhere else. And then every time I picked her up, I was interrupting something, delaying something. I do not take calls from Interstate 75 anymore. I requested a route change. Dispatch did not ask why, but sometimes, late at night, I check the call logs. I look for case 2023 4791, Claire Dennison, single vehicle accident, Howell Mill Road. The call comes in every few weeks. Different drivers respond. They pick her up, they deliver her to the morgue, they log her in, and every time she disappears, the records vanish, the body is gone. I do not know where she goes. I do not know why she keeps calling us back. But I know one thing. She is still out there on Interstate 75, waiting for someone to pick her up, waiting for someone to take her where she needs to go. But I will not be the one to do it. Not again, because I know now some bodies do not want to be delivered. Some bodies are not ready to stay dead, and Claire Dennison is one of them. The camera does not lie. That is what they tell you in forensic training. The lens captures what is there, nothing more, nothing less. Objective truth, frozen in pixels and light. I believed that for 9 years, until I photographed a scene where the dead decided to look back. My name is Iris Kaminsky, and I have worked as a crime scene technician for the Denver Police Department in Denver, Colorado for 9 years. I document death. I photograph bodies in the positions where they fell, capture evidence before it is disturbed, and create the visual record that investigators will study for months or years. The work requires detachment. You learn to see through the lens, not with your eyes. You learn to frame tragedy like it is geometry. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon in early November. Possible suicide, residential address in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. Officers had already secured the scene. I arrived at 3:47 p.m. The apartment was on the second floor of an old Victorian conversion. Small, neat, minimally furnished. The victim was in the bedroom, hanging from a ceiling beam. Male, mid-30s. The responding officers had already confirmed death. They had not cut him down. That was protocol. Nothing gets moved until I document everything. I set up my equipment. Camera, flash, tripod, scale markers. I started with the wide shots, the doorway, the full room, the position of the body. Then I moved closer. Medium shots, the ligature, the hands, the feet. I worked methodically, the way I always did. Frame, focus, shoot, check, move, frame again. I took the close up facial shots last. That is standard procedure. You document the identity, the expression, the visible trauma. I positioned myself directly in front of the body, adjusted the flash to reduce shadows, and framed the shot. The victim's eyes were closed, mouth slightly open, head tilted forward from the weight of the suspension. Typical post-mortem presentation for hanging. I took 3 shots, different exposures, different angles. I reviewed them on the camera screen. Clear, well lit, adequate for the case file. Then I took the final shot, one more for redundancy. I pressed the shutter. The flash fired. I lowered the camera. On the screen, the victim's eyes were open. I looked up at the body. Eyes closed, same position as before. I looked back at the camera screen. In the photograph, the eyes were open, staring directly at the camera, directly at me. I deleted the image. I assumed it was a glitch, a motion artifact, something wrong with the shutter timing. I took another shot. Same thing, eyes open, staring. I checked the previous 3 shots. All showed the eyes closed, only the last 2 showed them open. I looked at the body again. Eyes closed. No change, no movement. I stepped back. I took a wide shot from across the room. I reviewed it. In the wide shot, the eyes were closed. I moved close again. I framed the face. I took the shot. Eyes open. I put the camera down. I called the lead detective, a woman named Sergeant Lynn, who had been working homicides for over a decade. I told her there was something wrong with my camera. She came into the room. She looked at the body. She looked at the camera screen. She looked at me. The eyes are closed, she said. I showed her the photographs. She saw them. Eyes open in the close-up shots, eyes closed in the wide shots. She said, "Is this some kind of lens distortion?" I said no. I said it was impossible. The camera does not change what is there. It just records it. She told me to keep shooting as she wanted the documentation complete. I took 6 more shots. All close-ups, all showed the eyes open. In every photograph, the victim was staring directly into the lens, directly at me. I finished the scene documentation. I packed my equipment. I logged the images into evidence. I went home. I did not think about it again until the following Tuesday. I was reviewing the case file, preparing the images for the investigative report, when I noticed something. I had deleted 2 of the photographs, the first 2 that showed the eyes open. I remembered deleting them. I pressed the delete button. I confirmed the deletion. They should have been gone, but they were back in the file. Both images. Undeleted, logged into evidence with the rest of the scene photos. I checked the metadata. The deletion timestamp was there, but so was a recovery timestamp. The images had been recovered from the camera's memory buffer and automatically restored. I had not recovered them. The system had done it automatically. That was not supposed to happen. I opened the images, same photographs, same open eyes, but something was different. In the original shots, the victim had been staring at the camera. Now, the eyes were looking slightly to the left, off-center, like the head had turned. I pulled up the other close-up shots. I compared them frame by frame. In the first shot, the eyes were looking straight ahead. In the second shot, slightly left. In the third shot, further left. In the 6th shot, The eyes were looking almost 90 degrees to the side. The head had not moved, the body had not shifted, but in each photograph, the eyes were looking in a different direction, tracking something, following something across the room. I checked the timestamps. The shots were taken 3 seconds apart. Same position, same lighting, same everything, except the eyes. I went back to the scene log. I checked who else had been in the room during the documentation. Sergeant Lynn, two patrol officers, the medical examiner's investigator, all of them standing to my left. Behind me, out of the frame, the victim's eyes in the photographs were tracking them, watching them move around the room. I printed the images. I laid them out in sequence. 6 photographs, 6 different eye positions. And in the final photograph, the eyes were not just looking to the left, they were looking at something specific, something behind me, something the camera could not see. I called Sergeant Lynn. I asked her if anyone had been standing directly behind me during the documentation. She said no. I had been alone in my position. Everyone else had stayed near the doorway. I asked her if she remembered anything unusual about the scene. She said no. Straightforward suicide. No signs of struggle. No note. The case was being closed as a suicide pending toxicology. I did not mention the photographs. I just thanked her and hung up. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about those eyes, tracking, watching, following something I could not see. I got up. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the case file. I looked at the final photograph, the one where the eyes were looking almost 90 degrees to the left. And I saw it. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, was a reflection. The photograph had been taken with a flash. The flash had bounced off a mirror on the wall behind the victim. In the reflection, distorted by the angle and the lighting, was a figure. Not one of the officers, not Sergeant Lynn, someone else, standing directly behind me, close enough that I should have felt them, close enough that I should have heard them breathing. The figure was blurred, indistinct, but I could see the outline. A person, watching me, watching the victim. I zoomed in on the reflection. The image pixelated, but I could make out details. Long hair, pale clothing, arms at the sides, and then I saw the face, or where the face should have been. There was nothing, no features, just a smooth, empty space where the eyes and nose and mouth should have been. I closed the laptop. I did not look at the photographs again. The case was officially closed a week later. Suicide. The victim's name was Daniel Marsh, 34 years old, no known mental health history, no indication of why he had done it. But I think I know. I think he saw something in his apartment, in that room, something that should not have been there, something that watched him, something that followed him. And when I came to photograph the scene, it was still there, standing behind me, watching me take pictures, watching me document the death it had caused. The photographs are still in the evidence file. I requested that they be removed, but the request was denied. They are part of the official record. They cannot be deleted, but I have not opened that file since. I have not looked at those images, and I have not worked a suicide scene since. Because I know now, the camera does not lie. It captures what is there, even when you cannot see it, even when you do not want to, and sometimes what is there is not supposed to be seen. Last week, I received a notification from the evidence system. Someone had accessed the Daniel Marsh case file. I checked the log. The access was from my account. At 3:32 a.m., while I was asleep, I changed my password. I enabled two-factor authentication. But the next night, the file was accessed again. Same account, same time. 3:32 a.m. I do not know who is accessing it. I do not know what they are looking for, but I know one thing. The final photograph is different now. I checked. I could not help myself. I had to see. In the latest version, the victim's eyes are not looking to the left anymore. They are looking straight ahead, directly at the camera, directly at me. And in the reflection, the figure is closer. Not behind me anymore, standing right beside me, close enough to touch. I do not work as a crime scene technician anymore. I requested a transfer to the evidence lab. Desk work. No cameras, no scenes, no photographs, but the file is still there, in the system, waiting, and every night at 3:32 a.m., someone opens it, someone looks at those photographs, someone sees what I saw, and one day, I know, the figure in the reflection will not be in the photograph anymore. It will be standing behind me, for real this time, watching, waiting, looking back. History does not change. Evidence does not move. Photographs do not update themselves. These are the foundational truths of archival work. I believed them until I found file 0400, and now I understand that some truths are not fixed at all. My name is Samuel Park, and I have worked as a cold case intern for the King County Sheriff's Office in Seattle, Washington for 4 months. My job is to organize unsolved cases from the 1970s and 80s, digitize the files, and prepare them for modern investigative review. Most of the work is tedious. Sorting paper, scanning documents, cataloging evidence that has sat untouched for decades. You spend your days surrounded by forgotten deaths, hoping someone will finally remember them. File 0400 appeared on my desk on a Monday morning in late October. I did not pull it. I did not request it. It was just there, sitting on the top of my inbox stack when I arrived at 8 a.m. The file was thin, a single manila folder worn at the edges, held together with a rusted paper clip. The label read, File 0400, location unknown, date unknown. I opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph. Nothing else. No case notes, no witness statements, no detective summary, just the photograph. The image showed a hallway, institutional, white walls, gray linoleum floor, fluorescent lights overhead. At the end of the hall was a door with a small rectangular window, the kind of door you would find in a police station or a courthouse or a hospital. I looked at the photograph more closely. There was something familiar about it. The angle, the lighting, the door at the end. Then I realized. I recognized the hallway. It was here, in this building, in the King County Sheriff's Office. I stood up. I walked out of my office. I turned left. The hallway outside my door looked exactly like the hallway in the photograph. Same walls, same floor, same door at the end. I walked down the hallway. I counted my steps. 32 steps to the door, the same distance as in the photograph. I stood in front of the door. I looked through the rectangular window. Inside was a storage room, boxes, filing cabinets, old equipment, nothing unusual. I went back to my office. I looked at the photograph again. I checked the details, the position of the lights, the scuff marks on the floor, the door handle. Everything matched. The photograph had been taken from this hallway, from the exact spot where my office was located, facing the storage room at the end of the hall. I checked the back of the Polaroid. No date, no rating, nothing. Just the blank white backing of an old instant photograph. I checked the file folder. No case number, no victim name, no incident report. Just the label, File 0400. I asked my supervisor, a detective named Marquez, who had been working cold cases for 15 years, if he knew anything about File 0400. He said he had never heard of it. He said the file numbering system started at 1000. There should not be a file numbered below that. I showed him the photograph. He looked at it. He looked at me. He said, "That is this building." I told him I knew. I told him the photograph had been taken from outside my office. He asked me when the file had been created. I said I did not know. There was no date. He told me to check the archive logs. Every file that enters the cold case archive is logged with a date and a source. I checked. No record of file 0400, no intake date, no source notation. It did not exist in the system, but it was on my desk, physical, real. I could hold it. I went back to the photograph. I studied it frame by frame, and then I saw it. In the corner of the image, barely visible in the shadow near the door, there was a figure, a person, standing in the hallway, partially obscured by the angle of the shot. I had not noticed it before. The figure was so faint, so blended into the background, that it looked like part of the wall, but it was there, a person, watching. I looked closer. The figure was wearing dark clothing, standing still, facing the camera, but I could not make out any features, no face, no details, just a silhouette. I walked back to the hallway. I stood in the exact position where the photograph had been taken. I looked toward the door at the end. No one was there. The hallway was empty. I went back to my office. I looked at the photograph again. The figure was still there, in the same position, same shadow, same stillness. Then I noticed something else. The figure was standing in front of my office door, the door I had just walked through, the door that, in the photograph, was closed, but in real life, my office door was open. I always kept it open during work hours. I checked the photograph again. The door was closed, and the figure was standing directly in front of it, like it was waiting, like it was guarding. I closed my office door. I stood in the hallway, in the exact position where the photographer would have been standing. I looked toward the end of the hall. The door to the storage room was open, just slightly, maybe 3 inches, enough to see darkness inside. I had not opened it. No one had been down this hallway all morning. I walked toward the storage room, slowly. My footsteps echoed on the linoleum. I reached the door. I pushed it open. The room was empty. Just boxes and cabinets, the same as before. I turned to leave. Then I saw it. On the floor, just inside the doorway, was another Polaroid photograph. Face down, I picked it up. I turned it over. The image showed the same hallway, same angle, same perspective. But this time, the figure was closer, no longer in shadow, standing in the middle of the hallway, facing the camera. I could see more detail now. The figure was wearing a long coat, dark, familiar, the kind of coat I wore, the kind of coat hanging in my office right now. I looked at the face. It was blurred, indistinct, but I could see the outline, the shape of the head, the posture. It looked like me. I dropped the photograph. I backed out of the storage room. I walked quickly to my office. I grabbed my coat from the hook. I held it up. Same color, same cut, same everything. I went back to the storage room. The photograph was still there, lying face up on the floor. I picked it up. I compared it to the first photograph. In the first image, the figure was far away, standing in shadow. In the second image, the figure was closer, in the middle of the hallway. Both photographs showed the same hallway. Both showed the same moment. But the figure had moved, or the photographer had moved closer. I checked the back of the second photograph. No date, no writing, but there was something, a faint impression, like someone had written on a piece of paper resting on top of the Polaroid, and the pressure had left an indent. I held it up to the light. I could just make out the letters. A single word. Soon. I put both photographs back in the file folder. I sealed it. I placed it in my desk drawer. I locked the drawer. I did not tell anyone. That night, I worked late. I was alone in the building, finishing case summaries, when I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, coming from the direction of the storage room. I froze. The footsteps continued, closer. I counted them, 32 steps, the exact distance from the storage room to my office. The footsteps stopped, right outside my door. I waited. No knock, no voice, just silence. I stood up. I walked to the door. I looked through the small window. The hallway was empty. I opened the door. Nothing. No one. I walked down the hallway. I checked the storage room. Empty. I checked the other offices. All locked. I was alone. I went back to my office. On my desk, next to my keyboard, was a third Polaroid photograph. I picked it up. The image showed the same hallway, but this time the figure was standing directly in front of the camera. Close. So close that the face filled most of the frame, and I could see it clearly now. The face was mine, my exact face, staring directly at the camera, directly at whoever was taking the photograph, but the expression was wrong. The eyes were too wide. The mouth was too tight. It looked like me, but it was not me. It was something but wearing my face. I turned the photograph over. On the back, written in blue ink, was a date, October 23rd, 1974. 50 years ago, almost to the day. I checked the calendar. Today was October 22nd, 2024. Tomorrow would be the 50th anniversary. I did not come to work the next day. I called in sick. I stayed home. I did not go near the building. But at 8 a.m., I received an email from my own work account sent to myself. The subject line was empty. The message contained a single attachment, a Polaroid photograph. I opened it. The image showed my office, my desk, my chair, and sitting in my chair, facing the camera, was the figure, wearing my face, wearing my coat, staring directly into the lens. I closed the email, I deleted it, I emptied the trash, but 3 minutes later, it was back in my inbox. Undeleted, sent again, same timestamp, same attachment. I stopped opening it, but the emails kept coming every hour, every day. Always the same image, always the same figure, always sitting in my chair. I do not work as a cold case intern anymore. I resigned. I told them I was going back to school. They did not ask questions. But file 0400 is still there, in the archive, in the system, waiting for the next intern to find it. And when they do, they will see the photographs. They will recognize the hallway. They will walk down to the storage room. They will find the next photograph, and the next, and eventually they will see their own face staring back at them from 50 years ago, waiting, because file 0400 is not a case file. It is not evidence. It is a record of something that has not happened yet. Something that happens every 50 years in that hallway, in that building. And the photographs are not documenting the past. They are documenting the future, my future, your future, the future of whoever finds the file next. I just hope they are smarter than I was. I hope they do not open it. I hope they do not look. Because once you see your own face in that photograph, you cannot unsee it. And once you recognize the hallway, you cannot leave. You are already there. You have always been there, standing in the shadow, wearing the coat, waiting for the photograph to be taken, waiting for 50 years to pass, so you can do it all over again. The dead do not breathe. That is the first thing they teach you in medical school, and it remains true through every autopsy, every examination, every body you sign off on. Respiration ends at death, permanently, irreversibly. I believed this for 28 years until I watched a body bag breathe for 6 minutes and 17 seconds. My name is Dr. Ellis Grant, and I have worked as a coroner for the Alameda County Medical Examiner's Office in Oakland, California for 28 years. I have performed over 7,000 autopsies. I have seen every variation of death that human biology can produce. I have documented drownings, overdoses, blunt force trauma, stab wounds, gunshot injuries, and natural deaths from every organ system failure imaginable. In nearly 3 decades, I have never seen a corpse do anything that violated the fundamental laws of physiology until case 2024 3892. The body arrived on a Thursday afternoon in mid-November. Male, age 56. Found unresponsive in his apartment by a neighbor. Paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. No signs of trauma, no obvious cause. The case was assigned to me for routine autopsy to determine cause and manner of death. I began the examination at 2:15 p.m. External assessment first. The body showed no injuries, no marks, no indication of violence. Moderate obesity, signs of chronic liver disease. Skin showed early decomposition changes consistent with the time frame. Everything normal. I proceeded with the internal examination. I made the Y incision. I examined the organs. The heart showed cardiomegaly and coronary artery disease. The liver was cirrhotic. The lungs were congested. I took samples. I documented findings. Preliminary cause of death: cardiac arrest secondary to coronary artery disease. Manner: natural. I completed the autopsy at 4:32 p.m. I sutured the incision closed. I placed the body in a black polyethylene body bag, standard mortuary grade, and zipped it shut. I filled out the preliminary death certificate. I logged the case as complete pending toxicology results. I wheeled the body to cold storage bay 1 and placed it in drawer 8. I went home at 5:45 p.m. Standard Thursday. Standard case. No complications. The security footage was discovered the next morning. The night security guard, a man named Raymond, who had been working the facility for 12 years, was reviewing overnight recordings as part of his routine. He noticed an anomaly in the footage from cold storage bay 1. He called my office. He said I needed to see it. I went to the security office. Raymond pulled up the footage. Camera 3, cold storage bay 1, timestamp beginning at 9:47 p.m. The image showed the cold storage unit, rows of closed drawers. Everything still, everything normal. At 9:47 and 12 seconds, drawer 8 began to vibrate, slightly, barely visible. The handle moved maybe a quarter inch, then stopped. At 9:48 and 36 seconds, the vibration resumed, stronger this time. The drawer rattled against the frame. The handle shook. At 9:49 and 8 seconds, the drawer went still, completely motionless. Then, at 9:49 and 42 seconds, something changed. The camera angle did not show inside the drawer. It only showed the exterior, but the lighting shifted. A shadow moved across the drawer face, like something inside was moving, like something was creating a shadow against the bag. Raymond paused the playback. He looked at me. "Watch this part," he said. He resumed the footage. The shadow shifted again, then again, rhythmic, regular, like a pulse, like breathing. I told Raymond to zoom in on the drawer. He did. The image quality degraded, but the movement was clearer. The shadow expanded and contracted over and over, 6 cycles per minute, exactly the rate of normal human respiration. I told Raymond this was impossible. I told him the body had been dead for over 24 hours. I told him I had performed a complete autopsy. There was no respiration. There could not be respiration. He said, "Watch what happens next." At 9:55 and 59 seconds, the movement stopped. The shadow became still. The drawer went quiet. The breathing had lasted exactly 6 minutes and 17 seconds. I went to cold storage bay 1. I opened drawer 8. I unzipped the body bag. The body was exactly as I had left it. Same position, same sutures, same everything, no change. I checked for condensation inside the bag. None. I checked for any sign of gas expansion. None. I checked the temperature, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, normal refrigeration range, no possibility of bacterial gas production at that temperature. I sealed the bag. I closed the drawer. I went back to the security office. I asked Raymond if this had happened before. He said no. He said he had been monitoring the cold storage units for 12 years and had never seen anything like it. I asked him to pull footage from other nights. Other cases, he did. We reviewed 3 months of recordings, no other anomalies, just case 2024 3892, just drawer 8, just that one night. I ordered the footage preserved as part of the case file. I documented the observation. I did not include it in the official autopsy report. I could not explain it. I could not justify it. It was physically impossible, but I could not stop thinking about it. 6 minutes and 17 seconds, the exact duration of the breathing pattern, the exact rhythm. I went back to the body. I re examined the lungs. I checked for any retained air, any residual capacity. Nothing. The lungs were collapsed, empty, no air, no breath. I checked the abdomen, no gas, no distension, nothing that would cause the body bag to expand and contract. I checked the heart, no movement, no electrical activity. The organ was dead, completely, irreversibly. I could not find a physiological explanation, but the footage was clear. The bag had moved, the shadow had shifted, something inside that bag had been breathing. I asked to review the footage again, frame by frame this time. Raymond pulled it up. We went through it slowly. Every frame, every second. At 9:52 and 23 seconds, I saw something. In the shadow, in the movement of the bag. There was a shape, faint, barely visible, but there, the outline of a face, pressed against the inside of the body bag from the inside, like someone was trying to see out. I froze the frame. I stared at it. The outline was clear. Eyes, nose, mouth, all pressed against the black polyethylene, distorting the material, creating the shadow we had been watching. I asked Raymond if he saw it. He saw it. He went pale. I unfroze the playback. The face remained for 3 more seconds. Then it pulled back. The shadow shifted. The breathing continued. I stopped the footage. I could not watch anymore. I went back to cold storage bay 1. I opened drawer 8. I looked at the body. The face was peaceful, eyes closed, mouth slightly open, no expression, no tension, nothing that suggested the face I had seen in the footage. But I checked the inside of the body bag, the black polyethylene. I looked for any marks, any impressions, any indication that something had pressed against it from the inside. There were faint streaks on the interior surface, like something had been dragged across the material, like fingers, like someone had been trying to claw their way out. I photographed them. I documented them. I sealed the bag. I did not tell anyone. The toxicology results came back 2 weeks later. No drugs, no alcohol, no poisons. Cause of death confirmed. Cardiac arrest secondary to coronary artery disease. Manner, natural. The case was closed. The body was released to the family. The cremation was completed on November 28th. But I kept the security footage. I kept the photographs. And I kept the question that I could not answer. What had I seen in that cold storage drawer? What had pressed against the inside of that bag? What had breathed for 6 minutes and 17 seconds? I reviewed the footage one more time, alone, late at night. I watched the shadow expand and contract. I watched the face press against the bag. I watched the breathing slow and stop. And then I saw something I had missed before. In the final seconds, just before the movement stopped, the face turned, slightly, just a few degrees, like it was looking for something, like it was searching, and then it stopped, facing the camera, facing me. The eyes, pressed against the black polyethylene, looked directly into the lens, directly at me, and I realized it had not been trying to get out. It had been trying to see who was watching, who was there, who had put it in the bag. It had been looking for me. I do not review security footage anymore. I requested that the night guard handle all monitoring. I do not go to the cold storage units after dark. I do not work late. And I do not perform autopsies on cardiac cases anymore. I transferred those to my colleague, Dr. Singh. She does not ask why. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that face, pressed against the bag, staring at the camera, staring at me. And I think about the breathing, 6 minutes and 17 seconds, the exact amount of time it takes for brain death to occur after cardiac arrest. The exact window where consciousness fades, where the body shuts down, where death becomes permanent. What if, in that window, something remains, some fragment of awareness, some piece of consciousness that does not want to go, that presses against the darkness, that tries to breathe, that tries to see? What if I sealed that bag too soon? What if the body was still aware? What if it was still there, trapped inside, trying to tell me it was not ready? I do not know. I will never know, because the body is gone now, cremated, released to ash. But the footage remains, and every time I close my eyes, I see that face, pressed against the black polyethylene, staring, searching, looking for me. And I wonder, when my time comes, when I am the one in the bag, will someone seal it too soon? Will I be the one pressing against the darkness? Will I be the one trying to breathe? Will someone be watching? Will they see my face? Will they hear me? Or will they just zip the bag closed and walk away? I do not know, but I hope when that day comes, someone watches the footage, someone sees, someone understands that the dead do not always stop breathing. Not right away, not for 6 minutes and 17 seconds. And in those 6 minutes, they are still there, still aware, still watching, still trying to tell us they are not ready to go. Security protocols exist for a reason. Every person who enters a medical examiner's facility must sign in, provide identification, and state their purpose. No exceptions, no unauthorized access. The visitor log is sacred, inviolable, and completely reliable until someone who should not exist signs their name in ink and walks through locked doors to visit themselves. My name is Maeve O'Sullivan, and I have worked as a front desk officer for the Suffolk County Medical Examiner's Office in Boston, Massachusetts for 11 years. I control access to the building. I verify credentials. I maintain the visitor log. I am the first point of contact and the last line of security. In 11 years, I have never allowed an unauthorized person through those doors. Not once, not until I reviewed the log from the night of November 14th and found an entry that should not exist. The night shift is quiet. Between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., the building is supposed to be empty except for security and any overnight staff completing urgent casework. No visitors, no family viewings, no unscheduled access. The doors are locked, the cameras are running, the log remains blank. On the morning of November 15th, I arrived for my shift at 7 a.m. I relieved the night officer, a man named Derek who had been covering overnights for 6 years. He looked tired, but not unusually so. He said the night had been quiet. No incidents, no visitors, nothing to report. I took over the desk. I began my morning routine. I checked the visitor log. Standard procedure. I review every entry, verify every signature, cross reference every badge number. There was one entry, logged at 3:12 a.m. The handwriting was neat, careful. The signature was legible. The purpose of visit was listed as viewing Jane Doe. I checked the name, Catherine Moore, no badge number, no identification recorded, just the name and the time. I called Derek. He was still in the building, finishing his shift report. I asked him about the entry. He said there had been no visitors. He said the log had been empty when he left the desk. I showed him the entry. 3:12 a.m. Catherine Moore. His handwriting was not in the log, just the visitor's signature. He looked at it. He looked at me. He said, "I did not let anyone in." I checked the security footage. Camera 1 covered the front entrance. I pulled up the recording from 3 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. At 3:11 and 47 seconds, the front door opened from the inside. No one had approached from the outside. No one had buzzed in. The door just opened. A woman walked out. Not in, out, from inside the building, through the front door, into the parking lot. She was wearing a long coat, dark hair, average height. She did not look at the camera. She just walked out. The door closed behind her. I rewound the footage. I checked the previous 12 hours. No entry. No one had come in through the front door. But at 3:11 a.m., someone had left. I checked the interior cameras. Camera 5 covered the hallway leading to the viewing room. I pulled up the footage from 3 a.m. At 3:04 and 18 seconds, the woman appeared in the hallway. She was walking toward the viewing room, alone, no escort, no staff. She reached the viewing room door. She opened it. She stepped inside. The door closed. At 3:09 and 32 seconds, she exited the viewing room. She walked back down the hallway toward the front entrance. She stopped at the visitor log desk. She picked up the pen. She signed her name, Catherine Moore. She wrote the time, 3:12 a.m. She wrote the purpose, viewing, Jane Doe. Then she walked to the front door and left. I froze the footage. I zoomed in on her face. The image quality was good enough to see details. She was young, mid-20s, pale skin, dark eyes, expressionless. I had never seen her before. I checked the visitor database. No record of a Catherine Moore. I checked the employee directory. No Catherine Moore. I checked the case files. No Catherine Moore listed as next of kin for any current cases. I went to the viewing room. I checked the log posted outside the door. It listed which bodies were available for viewing. There was only one. Jane Doe, case 2024-4153, found deceased in Boston Harbor, unidentified, no next of kin. I opened the viewing room. The Jane Doe was behind the glass partition, covered with a sheet. I pulled back the sheet. I looked at her face. I froze. The woman in the security footage, the woman who had signed the visitor log, the woman who had left the building at 3:11 a.m. It was her, Catherine Moore, the Jane Doe, the same face, The same features, identical. I stepped back. I checked the case file. The Jane Doe had been found on November 10th, 4 days ago. She had been dead for approximately 72 hours when recovered. Cause of death, drowning. She had been in cold storage since November 11th. There was no possibility of misidentification. The autopsy had been completed. The photographs had been taken. She was dead, but the woman in the security footage was alive, walking, moving, signing the visitor log. I went back to the front desk. I reviewed the footage again, frame by frame. The woman walked with purpose. She did not hesitate. She knew where she was going. She knew which room. She knew what she was there to see, herself. I called the medical examiner, Dr. Nguyen, who had performed the autopsy on the Jane Doe. I asked her if there was any possibility of mistaken identity. She said no, as she said the fingerprints had been taken, the dental impressions had been recorded. The body was definitely the woman found in Boston Harbor. I asked her if the woman had been identified yet. She said no, still unidentified, still Jane Doe. I told her about the visitor log. I told her about the security footage. She came down to the front desk. I showed her the recordings. She watched in silence. Then she said, "Pull up the viewing room footage. Inside the room." I pulled it up. Camera 12 covered the interior of the viewing room. I found the timestamp. 3:04 a.m. The woman entered the room. She walked to the glass partition. She stood in front of it. She looked at the body on the other side, her own body. She stood there for 4 minutes and 38 seconds, not moving, not speaking, just watching. Then she raised her hand. She placed it flat against the glass, palm pressed to the surface. On the other side of the glass, behind the partition, something moved. The sheet covering the body shifted slightly, like something underneath had moved. The woman pulled her hand back. She turned. She walked out of the room. Dr. Nguyen and I watched the footage 3 times. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Dr. Nguyen said, "Check the body, now." We went to the viewing room. We went behind the partition. We pulled back the sheet. The Jane Doe was in the same position as before, same placement, same everything, but there was something on her right hand, on the palm, a mark, faint, red, like a handprint, like someone had pressed their hand against hers, but the glass partition was between them. There was no way for the woman in the footage to touch the body. The glass was sealed, secure, impenetrable. I checked the glass. I looked for any prints, any marks. On the visitor side, there was a clear handprint, fresh, still visible. On the body side, on the other side of the glass, where no one could have touched, there was another handprint, matching, identical, pressed against the glass from the inside. Dr. Nguyen photographed both prints. She documented them. She did not offer an explanation. I went back to the visitor log. I looked at the signature, Catherine Moore, written in blue ink, clear, permanent. I checked the database again. I ran the name through every system we had: Social Security, DMV, criminal records, missing persons. I found one match: Catherine Moore, age 26, reported missing on November 7th, last seen near the Boston Harbor waterfront. Physical description matched the Jane Doe, matched the woman in the footage. I called the missing persons detective assigned to the case. I told him we had a Jane Doe who might match his missing person. He came to the facility. He viewed the body. He confirmed Catherine Moore, positive identification. The Jane Doe finally had a name. The case was updated. The family was notified. Catherine Moore was released for burial on November 22nd, but the visitor log entry remains 3:12 a.m. November 15th. Catherine Moore, purpose, viewing, Jane Doe. She came to see herself 4 days after she died. She signed the log. She walked through locked doors. She stood in front of her own body. She pressed her hand against the glass. And somehow, from the other side, her dead hand pressed back. I do not work the night shift anymore. I requested a permanent day schedule. Derek requested a transfer to a different facility. Neither of us talks about what we saw, but the visitor log is still here. The entry is still there. Catherine Moore, 3:12 a.m., blue ink, permanent. And sometimes, late at night, when the building is quiet and the cameras are running, I check the footage. I look at the front entrance. I look at the hallway. I look at the viewing room, and I wonder how many other visitors have come here. How many other names are in the log that should not be? How many dead have walked through these doors to see themselves one last time? I do not check the old logs. I do not look back through the archives. I do not want to know, because I know now. The visitor log does not lie. Every signature is real. Every entry is true, even when the person signing is already dead, even when they are lying on the other side of the glass, even when they should not be able to walk or breathe or write. They still come. They still sign their names. They still visit. And we, the living, we just document it. We record it. We file it away. Because what else can we do? How do you stop someone from visiting themselves? How do you deny entry to someone who is already inside? You cannot. You just watch. You just log it. You just hope when your time comes, you do not come back. You do not walk through those doors at 3 in the morning. You do not sign your name in the visitor log. You do not stand in front of the glass and press your hand against it, hoping the body on the other side will press back. You just stay dead. You just stay gone. Because Catherine Moore came back. And I saw what happened when she did. I saw the handprint. I saw the glass. I saw the body move. And I know one day someone else will come back too. They will sign the log. They will visit themselves. They will press their hand against the glass, and their dead hand will press back. I just hope I am not here when it happens. I just hope I am not the one at the desk. I just hope I am not the one who has to watch. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once you know it is possible, you cannot forget. The dead do not stay dead. Not always. Not completely. Sometimes they come back. Just for a moment. Just for a visit. Just long enough to sign their name.